Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast, coming to you today, as you can see, or people who can see, or people who can't, who are just listening. I'm not in my normal studio. I'm in an extraordinary electric forecourt building just outside Gatwick Airport, which is just south of London in the United Kingdom. This is brand new. It's only been open a few days. It's absolutely amazing. This is the future of electric car charging, and I'm joined by the gentleman who created this whole thing, Toddington Harper, CEO and founder of Gridserve. Toddington, thank you for letting us come to your fabulous electric forecourt.
Robert, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for all of your incredible help and, again, inspiration over the years. When we opened our first electric forecourt at Braintree, it was incredible, the support that you gave us, the videos and so on that you kind of showcased. This is our third electric forecourt, so London Gatwick Electric Forecourt. It's the first forecourt to serve a major international airport. It's absolutely epic.
Yeah, it is. It's
Each time we've built one. So the first one was Braintree Electric Forecourt, and then we built the Norwich Electric Forecourt, which is a compact design. And now London Gatwick Electric Forecourt is also a compact design, but a lot of new technology to really kind of make that customer experience as awesome as it has the capability to be. In fact, above and beyond the vision that we had when we really started out.
Right. Because the thing that I always forget, and then every time I go to a motorway services, I'm reminded that I've forgotten, is I sort of think of you because of how amazing Braintree was, how incredible this is. I think of Gridserve, incredible, like, charging centres, like completely new design, no one's ever seen it before, kind of like a petrol gas filling station, but so much better. But a lot of chargers, staff on hand to help with them, well lit, with facilities right next to them, which is not like going to a charger in the corner of a car park at the back of the town hall in a puddle, which is the early experience of chargers. Yeah,
it certainly was. So my early experience, it's a really exciting year, 2024, because I got my first electric car in 2014.
Right.
So I'm now a decade.
You're a decade in.
A decade in, and I was a real enthusiast. Of being committed to sustainable energy for a very long time. Gridserve's purpose is to move the needle on climate change. And we can talk more about that. But when I got my first electric car, the charging experience was, pretty hairy.
Yeah.
And the cars are great, and actually they're now fantastic. But what was pretty clear to me is that, in order for us to deliver a mass transition, and support the mass transition to electric vehicles, then we needed to radically improve the charging experience from what I'd been used to in the early years, and actually also, in not too distant years, from historically from now. And so, I had a vision, and we had a vision, and there's an incredible team at Gridserve that we could build a charging experience that would not just kind of compete with or rival what you get from petrol station, but far exceed it.
Right.
And that's what an electric forecourt is. And that's why we call it electric forecourt, because we all sat down and thought, well, what are we going to call this?
There's no language for it.
There wasn't any language,
and
so we created language. And we're like, well, how can we make this charging experience as fantastic as possible? And actually, it took a while to get to that point, because initially we thought, well, let's just put existing chargers in, some of the existing petrol forecourt locations, and it was just very difficult. So to make that experience really good, because people are going to be there longer than you would typically be at a petrol station for. You need to have facilities which are designed for that experience and for that length of duration. You need more chargers than petrol pumps typically, because it takes longer, although that's speeding up as well. And so how could we delight? And so what we eventually did is we said, right, let's get back to a blank sheet of paper. We now got a name. It's called an electric forecourt. How do we make this absolutely awesome? How do we make the charging experience incredibly reliable? How do we provide a retail experience that matches the duration? And what is it that we can provide? And each time we do what we do, we learn and we get better. And Gatwick Electric Forecourt, or London Gatwick Electric Forecourt, it really is the next level. It's really fantastic, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, but I suppose one of the things is that you've not only built there's so far 3 amazing electric forecourts, but you've also transformed the kind of, particularly the motorway in the UK motorway experience of driving long distances in electric cars, because you've got a lot of, you've made the chargers. You basically took over a very brave and brilliant early network that wasn't 100% reliable.
Yeah, I mean,
I have to say, and you've made it. I don't know what it is, but 99% reliable. I mean, basically, I've never gone up to a Gridserve charger and gone, "Oh, it's not working." They've always worked. So you've made a massive change on that.
I had a lot of affinity with the original Electric Highway.
It was
developed
incredible.
by Dale Vince, Ecotricity, Simon, Crowfoot, the team there.
Yeah.
It was a. It was the first of its type.
Yeah.
And for me, as an EV driver in 2014,
it was
the only option I had.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But several years later, the technology was very outdated.
Yeah.
And what was required was a complete, a complete upgrade.
Yeah.
And so Dale, decided that Gridserve was the right organisation to pass the baton to for the next phase of the journey. So we then, instead of the Ecotricity Electric Highway, it became the Gridserve Electric Highway, and we set about upgrading it as quickly as we could.
Yeah.
So the first, part of the jigsaw of the equation was to how do we replace all the existing chargers as quickly as possible.
Right.
And we actually got to a point with 130 days after the acquisition, we had transformed the chargers in 130 locations.
Wow. Wow.
So that was the speed that we hit this at. But we always knew that was only going to work to a point.
Yes.
What we really knew was coming, and bear in mind this was after we'd built Braintree.
Right.
Is we really needed to provide infrastructure that was suitable for the mass transition.
Yeah.
So at the same time as doing that, we continued the work and added to the work of applying for new grid connections across the motorway network,
right,
and putting in a minimum of 6 high power chargers or high power charging bays.
Right.
So it's defined by 150 kilowatts or more.
Right.
Actually, all the chargers we've been putting on have been 350 kilowatts or more.
Right.
We're now doing 360 kilowatt chargers.
Oh God! So that we haven't reached a limit yet with the amount of kilowatts
we've ordered our first 400 kilowatt chargers already as well. But these sites all required new grid connections.
Yeah.
And so we've been, simultaneously applying for new grid connections, actually adding, applying for even bigger grid connections after we've applied for the first ones, and just really working out how we can put these things in a rate of knots. And we made some massive improvements in 2023 in particular. We now have, close to 180 charging locations.
Right.
The majority of those chargers are now these high power chargers. They're 350 or 360 kilowatts of power, supplied by brand new grid connections that we've put in. We've reached a level now that we are, we're the next kind of milestone we're very close to hitting is 200,000 vehicle charging sessions per month.
Right. Wow.
We've exceeded,
and that's across your whole network.
Across the whole network.
Wow.
The electric forecourts, the electric super hubs. We have, we've now exceeded, 4 gigawatt hours of energy per month. 4 gigawatt hours.
Wow.
If you can assume that,
Yes.
one 1 kilowatt hour is 4 miles of range, then 4 gigawatt hours about 16 million miles. So then the next milestone is 5 gigawatt hours of energy per month.
Right.
So that's around 20 million average EV miles for like a Tesla Model 3 or equivalent. And of course, that's only possible if people have the confidence to transition.
Yeah.
That's only possible if when people turn up, the chargers work really, really well. That's only possible if we do work out how to put these grid connections in, and we do procure the financing, and we've got some fantastic investors, some fantastic partners.
Right.
And we've been really, really able to go at a rate of knots. But again, the exciting thing about this journey is it still feels that we're very early on.
Right on the beginning. Yeah. Because that's one of the key things when I've explained that to people when I've raved about the Braintree electric forecourt, just because it was a definite sort of step change in the whole way of doing electric vehicle charging. But when I explain to people about the battery, that you've got the big battery that you have installed there, you can see a light goes on. It's a bit like when you explain to people who've never heard anything about it, don't know anything about vehicle to grid or vehicle to home or vehicle to load. They go, I didn't know that it could do that. It's a big battery in your car and you can take power out of it as well as putting it. That notion you can see a light switch on. And the same with well, there's a battery, particularly I think at Braintree. Was that not a battery that you needed to be able to run the charges, i.e. your grid connection wasn't big enough there, or was that a slightly different
It was needed
situation?
to make the economics work
Right.
of the site. Braintree, December 2020, it went on
Right.
briefly, but between the sort of two pandemic
between lockdowns.
Between
yeah.
lockdowns. The charging stayed open, but the main buildings were closed. And so it was around 2018 that we were trying to, close a deal with investors to kind of
Right.
get this done. And that was a very different period of time.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult to convince people who all they could see, a lot of the people we were talking to, a lot of the investors hadn't driven electric cars before.
Right.
People thought that a couple of chargers in a car park was what it was all about.
Right.
And there we were with a plan to build an electric forecourt
Yeah.
that was pretty different to
Yeah.
anything that had ever been done. We got some incredible support from Innovate UK, some incredible support from Hitachi Capital, now Navuna. But the business case was really difficult because
Yeah.
people didn't know how many cars were going to turn up. And we knew we needed to, for a facility like that, secure a big grid connection.
Right.
And but we also knew that grid connection wasn't going to be used at its full capacity for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So that particular site, the battery actually is used to monetize the grid connection, i.e.
Right.
we provide grid services. We provide, we trade energy at that
Right.
site. We can provide.
So you can buy
voltage
energy
control.
at night when it's
Yeah.
cheaper and sell it in the day when it's...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that means that we've got the grid capacity available for when it is required for EVs.
Right, right.
There are other sites, though, where we haven't got the luxury of being able to use a grid connection,
Right.
a big grid connection. We only have a small grid connection, and so for those sites, we like we have in Cornwall Services, for example,
Right.
that we have a small grid connection, and we use a battery to buffer it.
So that is when it's in the role of a buffer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are charging the grid connection whenever you can from the power that is available,
Yeah.
and you connect the chargers, the EV chargers, to the back of the battery.
Right. So they're never pulling power directly from the grid, effectively. They're
It's
always
kind of a
pulling-
mixture.
Right.
It's whatever you've got from the grid,
Right.
plus whatever you've got from the battery. But in the case in Cornwall, we only had 100 kilowatts from the grid,
Right.
and 1 megawatt from the battery.
Right.
So we turned effectively a 100 kilowatt grid connection into a 1 megawatt,
1 megawatt, right.
supply, which is actually very beneficial for the grid
Yeah.
as well. But the challenges around that is that, what happens when that battery, starts to be depleted.
Right.
And so we really look to see what else we can do to supplement that. So we have a 60 kilowatt canopy, solar canopy,
Right.
on top of the chargers.
Right.
So we have a 100 kilowatt grid supply
Right.
and a 60 kilowatt solar canopy.
Right.
And there's an incredible correlation we discovered. Sun to wheel is what we deliver.
Yeah.
Between energy generation and consumption across our public charging
Right.
network. And so what we've discovered, particularly in Cornwall, which has more visitors in the summer, and sun, is obviously generated. Sunshine is generated in the day. Then there's this fantastic mix. But we're actually taking it one stage further. We have a planning application in to now build a 1 megawatt solar farm,
Right.
as well.
In that area.
location,
Right.
and connect that as well.
Right.
So then what you have is you have a 100 kilowatt grid connection,
Yeah.
a 60 kilowatt solar canopy, a 1 megawatt solar farm.
Right.
And that means that the majority of the energy generated will be from solar.
Yeah.
And at some point, the actual grid connection will be upgraded too.
Right.
And when it is, that's fantastic. And we can then use the battery for things like grid services,
Yeah.
to support the grid capacity as well in the area. And really, this is what you need to do to be successful, we believe, in this space, is you need to have a really good understanding about what are the challenges and how can we be part of the solution?
Yeah.
How can we serve the grid? Because if you just kind of put your grid connection in and twiddle your thumbs and just hope it's going to be magically sorted, then you might be disappointed.
Yes.
And you need to come up with creative solutions for how we can deliver that infrastructure as
Yeah.
quickly as possible. Because the problem that we all have, and I said I'd get back to climate change, I was at COP28.
Right.
The first COP I went to was at COP 14.
Wow.
And that was in 2008 in Poland, in Poznan. I was later at COP 15 in Copenhagen.
Yes, which was the heartbreaking one.
That was the
Yeah.
heartbreaking one, and that's actually after that I changed course.
Right.
And COP processes, whilst there's been progress clearly, and Paris was a big step forward.
Yeah.
Glasgow, it felt like another step
Yes, it
forward.
did. It felt very positive.
I think COP28 was a massive step forward,
Right.
because it was the first event where the people who are producing the emissions were actually at the table,
Right.
making commitments to transition. But the problem with all of it is that nothing's happened anywhere near fast enough.
No.
And what we've now been told very clearly by, we were told this in March last year, March 2023. The synthesis report was produced by the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the top panel of scientists from the United Nations. So all the world's leading scientists around the world who've been studying climate change for about 35 years produced a report that summarized all of this, and the report was a final warning. And their final warning was that we have, if we want to keep temperature rises to within 1.5 degrees of warming, and we're running at about 1.2 at the moment, and it already feels haywire. It's already, it's nuts, isn't it?
Yes.
With 15 degrees Christmas, that doesn't feel right. But if we have any chance of stabling it to within 1.5 degrees of warming, then we need to peak global emissions by 2025, so next year.
Right.
And actually, it feels like there's a glimmer of hope that might happen,
Right.
which is positive. But then we need to reduce global emissions by 43% within 6 years.
Right. Which is a huge undertaking when you think of like the global impact of ground transport. Is it is the low hanging fruit, but it's also a very big low hanging fruit. It's massive.
It's an enormity, and the crazy thing about this is that because it's a 6-year issue, which we've been told by the world's leading scientists that if you don't do it in that period, you can't do it, and then you get feedback mechanisms which make the whole thing worse. The crazy thing about it is it's been left to people like us, Robert.
Yeah.
And everyone listening, people who can do something within the next 6 years.
Yeah.
And so, what we are really trying to do is we are trying to, ensure that in 6 years' time, we're not just kind of, looking back and going, oh, we knew. We were told, the final warning from the United Nations, we were told, and we tried really hard, but it was too difficult, and we didn't make it.
Yeah.
We don't want to be in that camp.
No.
We want to be in the camp of going, you know what? We were told the solutions were available, which they are.
Yeah.
And we knocked it out the park. We actually, as humanity, turned the situation around. That is something we must do.
Yes.
And certainly Gridserve are doing everything we can. And we call it moving the needle.
Right.
Moving the needle. At the moment, we're on, 1.2 degrees of warming. The needle is going up.
Yes.
We need to
push it back.
Move it,
Yeah.
push it back. And so, sites like London Gatwick Electric Forecourts, it's the first of its type for an international airport.
Yeah.
There's huge numbers of people at the airport as well. There's fleets who we can help transition.
Right.
There's people visiting the airport. There's taxis. There's cars. There's
car rental.
It's huge.
All
There's
those
people in
things.
the area in Crawley and so on. And so building something as absolutely awesome as this here.
Yeah.
That give people the complete confidence, but actually a fantastic experience when they can come. Here they can get a coffee from Costa Coffee. They can get we've got new technology. Little Fresh, Amazon Just Walk Out technology.
Very exciting.
We just remove all of the reasons why not to and replace those with such a bunch of good reasons why to.
Yeah.
And it's just the perfect location to help both charge vehicles but also drive that transition within the timeframes required.
I've got to mention the loos because that's very important. I'm sorry, the washrooms for our American listeners.
Okay.
But I mean, to be able to go to charge somewhere, and which it works and it's easy and it's very, very, frictionless, and then to be able to come upstairs and go to the gentleman's facilities, it was divine after a long drive. So I didn't have to think, I can charge there, but where am I going to go to the, where do I go for me? So I'm obsessed with my bladder range, Toddington. It's not a nice thing to discuss, but I can only my car can outdo my bladder range by about 150 miles. So I have to stop, regardless of charging. But it's very nice. You've got top quality toilet facilities here.
We do. That. I have been told we should enter some awards, and
I think so. They are top. They are top of the range.
Perhaps we should. But again, everything because we got the opportunity to kind of rethink. What does an electric charging station of the future look like?
Yeah.
What would an electric forecourt look like? We were like, well, do toilets just have to be grotty?
Yes.
Like that's sort of the standard in
Yeah.
a lot of travel locations. Not in all, they're rapidly
No.
being upgraded in many places and are already quite good. But we thought, well, how do we make everything great? How do we
Yeah.
have a great experience in the facilities,
Yeah.
in charging, in retail, and every single time we build a new site, we just work out how we can do it better.
Right.
And the other thing that you'll find at London Gatwick Electric Forecourt is it's the most accessible location.
Yes, that
as
is
well.
very noticeable. As soon as I drove in, I saw that.
Yeah, so we've got accessibility spaces. We've removed bump stops.
Right.
So particularly for people in wheelchairs, it's very very difficult to be able to use the charges. There's a bump stop in the way. We've dropped curbs. We've removed most of the curbs as well, and all of the curbs in all the accessible spaces.
Yeah.
We've got lifts.
Yeah.
And we've got ambulant toilets. We've got a whole variety of kind of different solutions. I won't say it's perfect because perfection is an ongoing project.
Yeah.
But
it's a massive improvement. I want to hark back to the very early charger installations, often by local councils with government money subsidising it. Just put them in the worst places you could possibly think, and they generally didn't work anyway. That was I'm talking 10 plus years ago. But that frustration, the difference between that and what you experience here is mind-boggling. It's
I would say that London Gatwick Electric Forecourt is about as good as it gets today.
At the moment, yes.
I don't think there's,
No.
I think Gridserve, we've always been on a mission to kind of, again, to move the needle, you need to raise the bar.
Yeah.
And you need to do that. You need to learn. You need to be humble to know that you can do better.
Yeah.
And you need to constantly do better. And the other thing that we've done here as well is we've really focused on. It's great if you already have an EV and if you're an EV enthusiast.
Yes. And you know how to use chargers.
And you knew how to use chargers.
Yeah. It's great.
But that's not the mass market.
No.
The mass market is people who have a car.
Yeah.
And want to, or have a fleet,
Yeah.
operate a fleet. And so how do you do that? And so the other part of this electric forecourt that we've really integrated here is the EV experience.
Right.
So people can come here, they can learn about electric cars, they can talk to people who aren't just trying to sell you something,
Yeah.
just learn about electric cars.
Yeah.
Whether people, lease electric cars from Gridserve or somebody else, they're still going to use our charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we really want to, just make it as easy as possible so people can actually book test drives. They can learn
Right.
about electric cars.
Right.
We'll have workshops. We have all sorts of different things here. And so, this next, London Gatwick Electric Forecourt, we've really taken it to the next stage, because if we can be a catalyst, not just for people visiting the airport, but actually also transitioning the airport fleets,
Yeah.
giving confidence to people in the vicinity
Yeah.
itself, then that just really is achieving our purpose.
The thing is, it's such a signal of change. If you've never talked about or think about electric cars, you've heard something on the news and, whatever it was, or you've read a negative report in a British newspaper, very easy to do. Then you drive past here, going to a car park and you're going on holiday, and you'd see this and you go, what's that? That's not like a gas filling station. It's different. What is it? That plants a little seed going, oh, you can go there and plug your car. Can you? I don't know. And also that experience, the difference between, we both went through it, where the first time I used a rapid charger, and it took me about half an hour to work out how to plug it in, and then, or do you plug it in first, or do you make it work for, all those things. Here, you could come here, you never used a rapid charger before. You could park your car in the bay and go find someone who works here and go, can you help me do that? And they would. That's a big difference.
Yeah, and actually we, again, because I've had some pretty hairy experiences over the last decade where I've turned up without energy and have been unable to charge, despite there being a perfectly working charger and my car. I didn't have a piece of plastic in my pocket.
God, yeah.
Or, the right accreditation or whatever. And so when we put our first chargers in, I was like, no. Every charger, minimum bar, contactless charging.
Yes.
And actually, we wanted to get to a point where, within 10 seconds, if you've never been here before,
the car will be charging.
It's pretty intuitive. You turn up, you plug your car in.
It says in a big screen in very clear words. Yeah.
Tap your card, you tap any contactless card, Apple Pay or whatever it might be, and it just starts charging.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're actually developing new technologies. There's an app coming that's taking it to the next level, auto charge.
Right. So that's
charge.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask. Is that in a future step where you literally drive in, you plug your car, and you walk away, and it starts charging?
That's absolutely, and that's what we talk about, smart connected.
Yeah.
you know, and then you really take it to kind of the next stage, and your coffee can be there when you walk up, waiting for you.
Already knows.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, we can possibly reserve you a slot.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about it. Interesting the point you make about the media. I think this is an important one. I mean, there has been there was in 2023 a lot of negative media.
Yeah, yes.
There wasn't
really
in 2022.
It was really ramped up, wasn't it?
It feels that was ramped up
Yeah.
negatively. It feels has been pushed.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know electric cars, I think a lot of people believe.
Oh yeah, why not?
Of this negativity.
Read it in the paper. It says in the paper that
some of it I think we can own.
Yeah.
It wasn't good enough.
The charging, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's always the one I go on about.
And some of it, I think there's possibly some industries that feel a bit threatened.
Yeah.
My view, if any of those people are listening to this podcast, would be get on the bus.
Get on the bus, mate.
Get on the bus.
Well, I mean,
it's left. The train has left the station. The vehicle has left the forecourt. It's happening.
Yeah.
This is an incredible opportunity, and there's a race to lead in this space as well.
Yeah.
And it's a big enough opportunity for everyone. And you know what? If you're successful, you help fix the planet and the future of humanity forever.
Yeah.
Well, we uniquely have an opportunity to do this over the next 6 years,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't help, highlighting problems that aren't real problems for people, But at the same time, as I said, some of it we also need to own.
Yeah.
And so building sites like London Gatwick Electric Forecourt, integrating awesome facilities like Costa. Little Fresh, Amazon Just Walk Out technology, having chargers that are reliable, having a call centre, our own people now at Gridserve, who, if there's an issue, we can fix it.
Right.
If there's whatever it might be, is something that we all as an industry need to do to kind of get on the front foot.
Yeah.
Because the less kind of bad news stories, the better.
Yeah.
Some of them will realise, but I think in 2023, it feels that a lot of it wasn't really very
I think
real.
there
It
could
was
be a
just
clue in the
perception.
fact that if you're charging 200,000 vehicles a month, not only that, a lot of those vehicles will also be charging at home, i.e. there's a lot of vehicles that aren't buying any petrol or diesel, which means that sales of those fuels will have dropped. And I mean, I'm sure it's a fractional percentage still.
Yeah.
But it's a drop. Whereas in the past,
yeah.
it's always only ever been, we sell more each year, we sell more each year.
Absolutely. And now, obviously, what's happened in the UK this year, the ZEV mandate, so zero emission vehicle mandate. So every, 22% of all vehicles that are sold by, OEMs, car companies in the UK every year must be electric.
Right.
Or there's a fine of £15,000 for everyone that exceeds that.
Right.
So,
there's a fine of £50,000 per vehicle.
Per
that
vehicle.
You sell. Right. Wow.
Per vehicle.
That's chunky.
That's chunky.
Unless you're Rolls Royce, where you could probably, if you're selling a £400,000 car,
and that's where we are in 2024. 2030, that number will be 80%. Or 15 grand.
And this is nothing to do with the ending the sale of combustion vehicles by 2035. This is additional.
Well,
or separate.
The headline was it was changed, but behind the headline, the legislation actually stayed in place.
This is why it's so confusing, isn't it?
It is confusing, but actually, in a way, it made it simpler because
think so, yeah.
by 2030, there was always an exclusion that hybrids were kind of excluded anyway.
Yeah.
And so what's now happened is that the ZEV mandate means it's 22% now. It increases to 80% by 2030.
And so when we're saying 22%, this is not hybrids because they are still combustion.
Yeah, this is zero emission
vehicles.
So ZEV, zero emission vehicle mandate. And then from 2030 to 2035, it increases from 80% to 100%.
Right.
And what's also coming, and the really exciting initiative that we were also a huge part of, which was announced last year, was electric heavy goods vehicles too.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and there's also a ZEV mandate for cars, and there's a ban for electric for zero emission heavy goods vehicles by 2040.
Right.
As well, and so that's coming at a rate of knots.
Yeah.
And so, it's now an inevitability.
Yeah.
That this is happening. It needs to be accelerated. Because, as I said, it doesn't matter what company somebody works in. We are all alive, and we have one chance, one planet, one home for all of us collectively.
Yeah.
And whilst I know people might have different opinions, my opinion is to believe the world's leading scientists of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who've studied it actually for 35 years, and who've said this is it. And actually, whilst at COP14 and COP15, you had to kind of like take the scientists' word for it that things would change unless we did,
because we weren't seeing it then.
You feel it now, don't you? I mean, the wildfires last year, just horrific. The droughts, the floods, the temperature changes, the seasonal changes.
Well, the one I'm very aware of is Australia, because Queensland is subtropical, i.e. rainforest, i.e. wet, dripping woodland. I've walked through it and it drips. It's where they film I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That area is not like tinder dry, except last year where it caught fire for the first time ever that anyone ever knew it, because it was so dry.
Yeah.
They actually had rainforest burning. Well, that never happened in 40,000 years of human history in Australia. Those changes. And when you see that, you see people in Australia going, mate, it's a bit different.
And we've been told,
bigger acceptance.
This is going to happen for a long
basically
time.
Pretty much all my adult life.
And let's just go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's just tackle that for a second. Like these, this kind of like decreasing breed of deniers out there. Let's just say they're right.
Yes,
for example,
I would love them to be right.
Let's just say they were right, and it's all not true. The world's leading scientists don't know what they're talking about.
They're all being funded by aliens.
All of that. And we still do this,
It's better.
What about clean air?
Yes.
Does anyone like that?
Yeah.
What about actually having clean air and actually having sustainable sources of power?
Yeah.
Isn't that just a great thing? Don't we all want clean air for our kids and our kids' kids? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing anyway?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the scientists are right, or at least I believe them, rather than the man in the pub who has a well-formed opinion, but it doesn't take into account the world's leading scientists' opinions.
Yeah.
But whichever way you look at it, this is. This is an inevitable transition.
Yeah.
And the great thing now, compared to, again, back to the COP processes of years gone by, the really exciting thing now is that the solutions that we need to provide clean air, to protect our planet, to provide sustainable sources of income, actually are the ones that are also able to provide the new jobs of today and tomorrow, the new industries of today and tomorrow. I mean, this is one heck of an economic opportunity, as well as all of that. So whether it's somebody who wants to do it for the climate, or whether it's somebody who wants to do it because they want to, pay the school bills, and they want to, be part of the kind of, the next generation of infrastructure, and the, economic opportunities for their kids and kids.
Huge.
This is the thing to do now, isn't it? And there's such a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
And really, I just hope that 2024 will be the year that some of those kind of deniers or those resistors will just, say, what? We're going in this direction, and who is it who generally wins? People who win the race, don't they? They're the ones you remember.
Yes.
And there's an opportunity to do that. So it's time to do that. It's time to get on board. It's time to do. And if people want to really see what good looks like, come to London Gatwick Electric Forecourts.
Absolutely.
And I would say beyond good.
Yeah.
I
With
think
or without an electric car, just come and see it.
I think we're touching awesome, aren't we?
I think you are gently stroking awesome. In a very polite way.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it is brilliant. Tom, it's been so good to talk to you, and it's so encouraging to hear your enthusiasm about this, because that's one of the things I was going to say earlier on was, when I hear someone on Twitter, which I no longer use, go, the grid can't take it, it's going to melt the grid. Then I talk to you, who actually understands how the grid works, or in fact, indeed, people who work at the national grid, who say exactly the opposite. And this is how, there are problems, but this is how we deal with them, and this is how we work with them. I think is a lot more convincing. In a sense, reflecting on the scientists who are telling us that.
On that point, that we all know that the grid wasn't created.
It wasn't built for this.
No. It was built almost for the opposite. You had a small number of very big fossil fuel generally based power stations that produced energy at all the right time, and it was centrally controlled, and it was centrally managed. We now have almost the opposite. So we have a very large number of much smaller, often, power stations run on different forms of renewable energy
at different times of the day
and an increasing amount of increasing requirement for electrification, whether it's electrification of vehicles, whether it's electrification of heat, and what we have wasn't designed for what we have today.
Yeah.
And that is what it is.
Yeah.
And there's two ways of addressing this. You can either be frustrated about it, and you can, vent your frustration and say it's not going to work. Or you can roll it with sleeves, and you can go, you know what, humanity can fix this. If we can put a person on the moon, if we can do all the, fix holes in the ozone layer, we can do put satellites in space. If we can do amazing things, then you know what, we can fix this. Yeah. And so, when it comes to the grid, my view from the beginning was let's serve the grid. Let's work out how to deliver solutions. As I said, we're now supplying almost 200,000 vehicles per month with over 4 gigawatt hours of energy. Yeah. Most of that through brand new grid connections, which we've delivered. Right. And actually we delivered far more charging infrastructure in quarter 3 of 2023 than we delivered entirely of 2022. Right. In fact, our biggest charging location is now on the motorway network, bigger than even the electric forecourts itself. And so we're moving at a rate of knots. Yeah. And for the people who are out there saying, will the grid cope? Will the grid, be able to cope? It absolutely will. Yeah. And if people need confidence about that, again, come and see our infrastructure. Yes. Come and see what's happening. Yeah. It's all possible. It just needs desire, persistence, and we certainly have. Gridserve certainly has that in spades.
Absolutely. We're going to have to round it up there, Toddington, but it's been absolutely brilliant. So what I want to say to our lovely listeners and viewers is 2 things that are critically important. If you're ever in the Gatwick area, for sure, come and see this amazing facility. It is extraordinary. With or without an electric car, it's worth visiting anyway. If you're in Braintree and Essex, go and see that one. If you're in Norwich, go and see that one. And later this year, Stevenage
Electric Forecourt.
Stevenage Electric Forecourt.
I'm very much looking forward
to that. But additionally to that, also, if you want to find out more about electric vehicles, how they work, about charging, about home energy, about battery storage in your house, or hot water, or central heating, and all those things, you could come to Fully Charged Live, either in Sydney in a few weeks in Australia, or in London at the XL at the end of March. I'm just giving a little plug there. Details for all that will be in the show notes of this episode. But that's all we've got time for this time. As always, if you have been watching or listening, thank you.